Keeping a close eye on Paul Manafort's trial this hour. It was on pause for most of the day today as the judge in the case huddled with lawyers from both sides. It's unclear what was discussed in the hours-long secretive meetings or what the delay will mean for Robert Mueller's case against Donald Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. But that mystery follows a new ruling from the judge that should serve as a flashing red warning light to Donald Trump's lawyers, that the broader Russia investigation is now moving full steam ahead and that the public has seen only the tip of the iceberg. From the New York Times, quote, the federal judge overseeing the trial of Paul Manafort sealed a transcript on Thursday of a private discussion in front of his bench after prosecutors from the special counsel's office argued that they needed to protect an ongoing investigation. The conversation concerned whether investigators had questioned Rick Gates, the government's star witness and Mr. Manafort's longtime deputy, about the Trump campaign. Prosecutors argued that they needed to protect the secrecy of their inquiry and limit the disclosure of new information. The judge, T.S. Ellis, ruled in their favor. The ruling confirms what we have believed to be true throughout the trial, that Rick Gates has more to offer Mueller than evidence of Manafort's alleged financial crimes. And that could mean danger for Trump or members of his inner circle. Maybe that explains the new battle cry emanating louder than ever out of Trump's orbit.
Well, I think if it isn't over by September, then we have a very, very serious violation of the Justice Department rules that you shouldn't be conducting one of these investigations in the 60-day period.
This needs to be over with soon. I think it's been very bad for the country, and we're at a point in this inquiry where they can wrap it up.
Mayor, I know you've said, and I've said this, we want to see this come to closure soon here. Mayor?
Yeah, we do. It's about time that it ends. I also think, and I hope the special counsel is as sensitive to it as we are, we do not want to run into the November elections. So you back up from that. This should be over with by September 1st.
I think it needs to end very soon. And it needs to end very soon because the nature of what's taking place here is irregular, and that's being kind.
From lock her up to wrap it up, that sounds like lawyers speak for we might be losing. The latest evolution of their messaging strategy, from no collusion to collusion isn't really a crime to let's call the whole thing off, comes as we see more signs just today that Mueller is zeroing in on another one-time Trump ally, Roger Stone. He's being investigated for communicating with Russians over stolen emails. He seems likely to become the probe's next target. One of his close allies, the Manhattan Madam, testifying before a grand jury in the investigation today, while another one of Stone's allies is being held in contempt of court today for refusing to comply with a judge's order to testify, which means he's choosing potential jail time over cooperating with Robert Mueller. Here to help us understand all the day's developments, Joyce Vance, a former U.S. attorney, now law professor and MSNBC contributor. Frank Figliuzzi, he's a former assistant director for counterintelligence at the FBI and an MSNBC contributor. On set with us, White House reporter from the Washington Post, Ashley Parker, and Mike Schmidt, Washington correspondent for the New York Times. Joyce, let me start with you and all the machinations of this, I guess for a non-lawyer and someone outside this court. It seems like a bizarre trial with a very interesting character as a judge. Tell us what it means that they were on pause for so long. Do we know what they were doing? And what are the scenarios for what could have been going on?
We don't know exactly what was going on, but this really isn't at all unusual for trial. Sometimes when you get to this point or even earlier on in a case, issues can come up. There can be the need for a lot of back and forth between the judge and the lawyers as they sort out legal issues. And sometimes you can see juries either sitting in a courtroom or back in the jury room wondering what the delay is about because the judge doesn't necessarily share it with them either if it's purely a legal issue about admissible evidence. Here we had a little bit of a curiosity, thinking that perhaps it might involve jurors who had begun to deliberate prematurely. The rule is that the jurors aren't supposed to begin to discuss the evidence until the trial is complete and until they're all in the room together. They're admonished not to talk in twos or threes, but only to deliberate as an entire group. We don't know for certain that there was any problem along those lines. The judge did give an additional instruction, but they're all back in the room and listening to evidence, so it looks like the parties agreed the case was ready to move forward.
Frank, I know we were pinging you all day with questions about your theories of what this pause could have been about. Can you share them with our viewers?
Well, my first thought was indeed what appears on its face, that some juror may have been reported as saying or doing something inappropriate. But as Joyce said, this happens all the time. It can be remedied. The key for me on this is whether there's any appealable issue. But it sounds like there's no disagreement between the defense and the prosecution on this. It sounds like it was an amicable agreement to resolve it. And if this is what happened, we move on. And don't forget, there are alternate jurors that if indeed this continues to happen, this is why you have alternates. You can insert someone and dismiss the juror who's causing an issue. That may have been it. And we may be wrong. There may have been something else going on as well.
Joyce Vance, let me ask you to weigh in on the other story that we mentioned at the top of the show, this ruling that this conversation could be sealed because of concerns about Gates' testimony in the context of the larger ongoing investigation.
This, I think, is very interesting. We also heard this week that it was possible that Gates wouldn't serve any jail time at all at the end of these proceedings. And you'll remember that he was indicted along with Manafort for the whole kit and caboodle. So how do you go from that sort of a mess to possibly not serving jail time? I don't think it's just by testifying in the Manafort trial. Frankly, the government didn't really need Gates to prove this case. So it must be that they're getting assistance from him on something else. And that something else is the content of those 6 sealed pages of the transcript from yesterday. Gates was around for the Republican convention. He made no details, for instance, about how the Republican Party platform was softened towards Ukraine. He could know about money donors to the inauguration. He could know about contacts between people involved in the campaign and Russians. So there are a lot of possibilities for what he might be able to narrate. We'll just have to remain curious a little bit longer.
Frank Figliuzzi, he was around on the campaign when figures like Carter Page were also swirling around that rather chaotic campaign. George Papadopoulos was around that campaign. It started as a counterintelligence investigation, something that you know a little bit about. How would you use Rick Gates in the larger investigation into potential collusion or conspiracy with the Russians to impact the 2016 campaign? What questions would you have him answer in exchange for what Joyce just described, potentially no or very little jail time?
Yeah, so I've never thought that Rick Gates was all about a white-collar crime case against Manafort. That he can answer the key question, the umbrella question of what this is all about, which is to what extent did this campaign collude with an adversarial government to impact the outcome of an election? And did the President of the United States have as his campaign chairman an agent of a foreign power? That's what Gates gets to the heart of. That's what he's answering. And I believe he knows the answers to those questions and has already provided them to the Mueller team.
And you reminded us today that Gates was around a lot longer than Manafort was. They've spent a lot of their fire attacking Manafort, saying he wasn't around very long. We hardly knew him. He gets the Papadopoulos coffee boy treatment. But Rick Gates was, and they haven't done nearly as effective of a job of distancing themselves from all of the episodes. He was around for the transition. He was around for the inauguration. He was in and out of this White House for meetings almost until he was indicted.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Rick Gates was a survivor. I can remember on the campaign being told by people, the president wants him gone, the president wants him fired, he's out tomorrow, and then there he was. So not only does he have this perch as Manafort's right-hand man, but then he's there through the rest of the campaign. The convention is mentioned, the transition. He had a role on the inaugural committee, and then through a close friend of President Trump's, he was deeply involved in sort of the day-to-day business of the White House, spotted, on those 16 or 18 acres. Really, as you said, up until the day he was indicted. And so I think this is just another reminder of how deep the tentacles of Mueller's probe potentially go and how much we don't know. And so while there's not a ton of concern, at least yet, in the West Wing of Manafort flipping, there is more concern about, well, A, Gates has already flipped, and B, what he may know.
And do you have any sense, Mike Schmidt, that there's anxiety or any growing anxiety just about all these fronts that they're managing now? So it's the Manafort trial. It's this ruling yesterday that there is a value that Gates has to the larger investigation. It's the we haven't heard much from Cohen this week, but that's obviously ongoing and unfolding. Is the president there sort of stewing? Is that why we see so much Jay and Rudy all over the airwaves?
I think that Jay and Rudy are spending a lot of time keeping the president calm as much as possible and trying to hold him back and unsuccessfully.
He'd be doing more if they weren't out there.
You know, and they've shown time and time again that failure as he continues to tweet about this and continues to talk about it in ways that pretty much everyone in the legal community says are damaging. It's why would he continue to talk about such sensitive matters that relate directly to his own conduct, and he continues to do it. So, you know, look, I think, you know, the president gets very upset a lot and he gets reported a lot in the press, but he obviously has to look at this and be concerned, but I'm not sure what else he can do. He has one decision he can make to do that, and that's to fire Mueller, and he just doesn't seem to have the guts to do that.
You may have just waved a red flag in front of a bull. Doesn't have the guts to do that. Let's listen. Jay Sekulow, the president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, were on the radio when we came on the air. Let's listen.
When you say a perjury trap, in other words, here's you got one witness that says this is what happened, and then you got another witness that recalls, well, no, that's not how I recall it. It happened this way. And does then someone write up a report and say, well, we believe this one, we don't believe that one, thus it's perjury?
Flynn is the example. No crime. If it had been said, the president says, go easy on him.
Which the president says, he didn't say
stop it, don't do it. So no crime. However, it didn't take place, according to the president. According to Comey, it did. Now,
of course, if it did, it wouldn't have mattered. But then but you're right.
I'm thinking my cousin Vinny, but why are they out talking about? Why are they acting out how the president might perjure himself in interview after interview after interview?
See, I think that this cannot be said enough. They believe the only thing that matters is public opinion, and if they can muddy the waters and make it more difficult for the average voter will put less pressure on people in the House of Representatives, and the president will not face an impeachment. It's that simple. So if they're on the air like they are today, going on and on about different things, making it more confusing, muddying the whole thing, then to them, they think that's effective. Rudy will look at the poll numbers from before he came in and where they are now, and they'd say, look, we have eroded Mueller's standing with voters. That is an accomplishment for us. That's how they see it.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.